Sure. I waited by the door all day. Nobody came. 6-year-old Maya Santos said softly. The words stopped Caleb Warren halfway across the apartment hallway. Caleb remembered every word long after leaving. Sure. He had come to Building C because a water leak in one of the company-owned units had damaged the ceiling below. The property manager expected him the next morning. Sure. But Caleb had finished aboard dinner early and decided to see the damage without a prepared tour. He wore a dark sweater, no tie, and carried no entourage. Sure. Most residents knew him only from company newsletters and annual videos. To Maya, he was simply a quiet stranger standing beside the elevator while rain tapped the narrow windows. Sure. She sat on the floor outside apartment 3B with her school backpack beneath her head and a pink coat wrapped around her knees. A paper crown from class had gone soft in the damp air. Beside her rested a lunchbox, sure, unopened except for one corner where she had taken out a cracker. The hallway light clicked off every few minutes, and Maya waved both arms until it returned. Caleb looked at the apartment door, sure, then at the clock on his phone. It was nearly 8. "Where's your mother?" he asked. "At work." "Does someone usually stay with you?" "My neighbor, Mrs. Kim. She had to go to the hospital because her sister fell." Sure. Maya said it carefully, as if repeating instructions she had been given. "Did your mother know?" Maya nodded. "Mrs. Kim called. Mama said she was coming fast." "How long have you been here?" Sure. The child counted on her fingers, lost track, and looked down. "After the yellow bus. Then the lights came on outside. I knocked because maybe Mama was sleeping, but nobody came." Caleb's chest tightened. Sure. He crouched several feet away, keeping his voice calm. "Do you know your mother's number? It's in my bag, but I'm not supposed to give it to strangers. That is a good rule." Maya studied him. "You live here?" "No." Sure. "Then you're a stranger?" "Yes." The honesty seemed to reassure her more than false familiarity would have. Caleb called the building's emergency manager and asked for a female staff member to come to the hallway. Sure. He did not identify himself at first. While they waited, Maya leaned against the door and whispered, "Mama always comes, just not when the red numbers happen." "What red numbers?" "The clock at her work." Sure. "When it turns red, they have to stay." The emergency manager arrived, recognized Caleb, and nearly dropped her keys. Within minutes, she contacted Maya's mother, Teresa Santos, through the employee directory. Sure. Teresa answered breathlessly over the sound of industrial vacuum cleaners. "I am leaving now," she said. "Please tell Maya I am coming." The manager explained that Caleb Warren was with her daughter. Silence followed. Sure. "The CEO?" Teresa asked. Caleb took the phone. "Your daughter is safe. Take the time you need to travel carefully." "I was supposed to leave at 5:30, Teresa said. "A supervisor called mandatory overtime." Sure. "I told him my childcare failed. He said walking out would count as refusal." Caleb looked at Maya, still sitting against the locked door. "How soon can you arrive?" 40 minutes if the bus connects. I'll stay." "Sure." "You don't have to." "Yes," he said. "I do." He ended the call and sat on the floor across from Maya. Caleb Warren was known inside Warren Global Services as the silent CEO. He rarely raised his voice. Sure. Gave short answers in meetings, and allowed executives to fill empty space with their own certainty. Sure. His quietness had helped him build a facilities and logistics company from one regional contract into a network, employing more than 20,000 people. It had also allowed him to hear only what reached the top. Sure. The company's quarterly reports praised productivity, attendance, and rapid completion of client work. Its overtime policy was presented as fair and predictable. Sure. Employees could be required to remain up to 3 hours beyond a scheduled shift during urgent demand, and repeated refusals could affect reliability ratings. Managers were told to consider documented emergencies. Sure. In practice, childcare problems were rarely accepted unless supported by paperwork no parent could produce at the moment a babysitter became ill. Caleb had approved the policy 2 years earlier. Sure. He had read it as protection against last-minute staffing shortages. Teresa lived it as a threat delivered at 5:28, 2 minutes before she was supposed to clock out. Maya opened her lunchbox and offered Caleb the remaining cracker. "You can have half," she said. "You should eat it. I saved it because waiting makes my stomach loud." The emergency manager brought water, fruit, and a blanket. Maya accepted the water but asked whether eating the fruit would mean her mother had to pay. The manager said no. Maya still looked at Caleb before taking one slice. "Why did nobody open the door for you?" he asked gently. "Mama has the key. Mrs. Kim has one, but she took it to the hospital. I'm not allowed to hide one outside because bad people look under mats. Another good rule. Another system that assumed an adult would arrive on time. The rain grew heavier. Caleb's chief operating officer called twice. A labor cost meeting awaited his approval. And a client in Seattle wanted to discuss extending a major contract. Caleb sent one message: reschedule. I am handling an employee safety failure. He did not yet know whether the failure belonged to the building, the supervisor, the overtime policy, or himself. Maya asked why he was wearing expensive shoes if he did not live there. He almost smiled. "How do you know they are expensive? They're too clean." She told him her mother cleaned offices at Warren Global's downtown headquarters. Teresa left home before sunrise, returned in the afternoon long enough to meet Maya's school bus, then sometimes worked evening shifts when co-workers were absent. Mrs. Kim usually helped during schedule changes. Teresa paid her when she could, and repaid the rest through groceries and errands. "Does your mother work late often?" Caleb asked. "Sometimes the red numbers happen. What do you do then?" "Wait with Mrs. Kim, or Mama runs from the bus." Maya demonstrated with 2 fingers sprinting across her knee. Teresa arrived at 8:38, wearing a gray housekeeping uniform beneath a wet coat. She came down the hallway almost running, just as Maya had described. The child stood but did not rush toward her immediately. She looked at Caleb first, as though needing confirmation that the waiting had ended. "Mama," she said. Teresa dropped her bag and knelt. "I'm sorry, mi vida." Maya pressed into her arms. "I know. Nobody came? I came." "Yes." Teresa closed her eyes. Too late. Caleb looked away. Giving them privacy without leaving. When Teresa stood, fear had replaced relief. She recognized him from the company badge photographs displayed near the headquarters entrance. "Mr. Warren, I can explain." "You do not need to explain loving your daughter. I mean the child care. Mrs. Kim had an emergency. I told my supervisor. I should have arranged another backup." At 5:28, Teresa's expression tightened. "Employees are supposed to have reliable care. Children are not machines with replacement parts." She glanced toward the building manager. "Will this go in my file?" "No." "Will my supervisor know I spoke to you?" "He will know the policy is being reviewed. Your name will not be used without your consent." Teresa did not look reassured. Caleb asked whether they had eaten. Teresa said she would prepare something inside. Maya's hands were cold, and the paper crown had torn along one side. "I can have someone bring dinner," Caleb offered. "We have food. I believe you." He understood that assistance offered too quickly could sound like judgment. Before leaving, he handed Teresa a card with a direct number. "Tomorrow, an independent employee advocate will contact you. You can decline. You can have someone with you. You will not lose hours for this conversation." Teresa accepted the card but said, "The policy says emergencies are considered. Was yours?" "No. Then the policy is not what it says." Caleb returned to headquarters after 9. The cleaning shift was still active. Employees moved through empty offices, while executives' family photographs sat on desks beside dark computer screens. He found Teresa's supervisor, Martin Pike, reviewing attendance on a tablet. Pike looked startled. "Mr. Warren, we were not informed you were visiting. That seems to be a useful condition tonight." He asked why Teresa had been held for overtime. Pike explained that a client inspection had been moved to the next morning. 2 workers called sick. The headquarters required additional cleaning, and policy allowed mandatory extension. Teresa had said her neighbor could no longer watch her daughter, but employees often cited childcare when they disliked overtime. Did you believe she was lying? I believed the shift still needed coverage. Did you offer another worker the hours voluntarily? We asked. No one accepted. Did you contact the backup staffing pool? That affects the department's monthly cost. Did you allow her to leave and document the emergency? Pike hesitated. Repeated exceptions create unfairness. How many exceptions has she requested? I would have to check. Caleb waited. Pike opened Teresa's file. She had requested 1 early departure in 14 months after Maya developed a fever at school. Her attendance rating was excellent. She had covered 7 unplanned shifts. Pike's voice became quieter. I did not have that history in front of me. You had her standing in front of you. Pike defended the decision without cruelty. If supervisors released every parent with a child care problem, non-parents would carry more overtime. Clients penalized incomplete work. His bonus depended partly on labor efficiency and service scores. The department's backup pool was expensive and required regional approval after a budget threshold. Caleb heard a familiar structure. The policy technically permitted judgment. The incentives punished anyone who used it. He asked Pike to preserve all schedule records, messages, overtime assignments, refusals, and disciplinary ratings from the previous year. He placed Teresa on paid leave for the next day and prohibited retaliation while an independent review began. Then he walked through the building until after midnight, speaking with workers from housekeeping, security, maintenance, and the mailroom. Dotkins described keeping children asleep in parked cars while spouses finished shifts. One father had paid a teenage neighbor with grocery money after mandatory overtime was announced 10 minutes before dismissal. A warehouse clerk missed a school meeting and received a warning when he left anyway. A mother working at another facility had been moved to fewer hours after requesting a predictable schedule during a custody change. Employees without children described a different resentment. They were repeatedly expected to stay because supervisors assumed parents had stronger reasons to leave. One worker said she cared for an elderly father, but the form listed only child care, medical emergency, or personal refusal. She stopped explaining because managers treated caregiving as a hierarchy. The problem was not simply that single parents needed special treatment. The company had designed schedules around workers having invisible people ready to absorb every last-minute demand. By 3 in the morning, Caleb understood why the quarterly reports showed strong attendance. Employees did not miss work because the policy was flexible. They avoided missing work because the consequences frightened them more than whatever waited at home. The review began with Teresa's consent. She met an outside labor specialist with a representative from a worker support organization. Caleb did not attend the first interview. Teresa explained that she became a single parent when Maya's father left the country 2 years earlier and stopped providing regular support. She worked mornings at the headquarters and occasional evenings through an internal coverage program. The daytime shift should have ended early enough for school pickup. Mandatory overtime had been announced late on 11 occasions that year. Mrs. Kim covered most. Teresa used 2 personal days for the rest. Each absence reduced the time available for illness or school closures. She was not irresponsible. Her child care plan had layers: school, neighbor, sister when available, and a paid program during breaks. That evening, 2 layers failed simultaneously. The policy demanded a 5th layer from someone whose wages barely covered the first 4. Teresa admitted she had once left Maya inside the school office for nearly an hour after overtime. The school warned that repeated late pickup could affect Maya's transfer placement. Teresa began telling supervisors that she had medical appointments, because they treated those explanations more seriously than childcare. I hated lying, she said. But the truth sounded optional to them. The independent review examined 12 facilities. It found mandatory overtime concentrated among lower-wage departments, whose employees had the least schedule control. Notices were often issued near shift end because managers delayed calling backup staff to protect budgets. Employees could request emergency release, but supervisors received no training on evaluating it and faced performance penalties when overtime coverage failed. Single parents were affected most visibly, but the policy also harmed employees caring for disabled partners, younger siblings, or elderly relatives. Workers who refused overtime received reliability marks that influenced raises, preferred shifts, and internal transfers. The marks were described as operational data, not discipline. So many employees never knew they existed. The company's dashboards tracked overtime acceptance, client completion, and labor cost. They did not track how much notice workers received, how many emergency releases were denied, or how often the same employees were assigned because their family obligations were considered easier to override. Caleb's executive team initially treated Maya's case as a supervisor error. They recommended retraining Pike, creating a childcare hotline, and offering Teresa a private schedule accommodation. Caleb rejected the limited solution. If we fix one mother's calendar because I happen to meet her child, we preserve the policy for everyone I did not see. The chief financial officer warned that flexible scheduling could increase labor costs and reduce client reliability. The operations director said some employees would abuse broad emergency rules. Both concerns had truth in them. A system dependent on immediate service could not allow every shift to dissolve without process. Fairness also required that workers without children not become permanent backups. The labor specialist proposed a larger redesign. Overtime would be posted first as voluntary, with premiums increasing when notice shortened. Backup pools would be funded centrally, rather than charged entirely to local managers. Mandatory extensions would require regional approval except in genuine emergencies. Employees could register protected availability windows without disclosing family details. Refusing work outside those windows would not affect reliability scores. Caregiving emergencies would be reviewed after the employee reached safety, not argued at the clock, for roles requiring unpredictable coverage. Teams would rotate on-call responsibilities with advanced schedules and additional pay. No group would be assumed more available because of marital or parental status. Executives worried the changes would become expensive. Caleb asked what the current policy cost outside the spreadsheet. Human resources produced turnover data. Departments with the highest mandatory overtime had the highest resignation rates, especially among experienced women. Exit interviews mentioned scheduling, but reports classified the comments as work-life preference. The company spent heavily recruiting replacements while celebrating lower hourly staffing costs. The low-cost policy was not low cost. It transferred expense into workers' homes, schools, health, and eventual resignations. Pike received a fair review. He had enforced the policy harshly and dismissed Teresa's emergency without checking her record. He had also repeatedly asked regional management for a larger backup budget and been denied. Emails showed an operations vice president praising supervisors who held the line against personal excuses. Pike's bonus formula penalized late client completion, but contained no measure for emergency handling or schedule notice. He said, "You told us the work had to finish, and the labor number could not move." Something had to give. Caleb answered, "You chose people's lives because they were not visible on your dashboard." Pike looked tired. "That is what everyone above me chose, too." Caleb did not deny it. Pike lost supervisory authority during retraining, but was not made the sole villain. The operations vice president faced disciplinary review for encouraging managers to disregard legitimate emergencies. Sure. Reliability marks based on caregiving refusals were removed from employee files. Past transfer and promotion decisions influenced by those scores were reopened. Sure. Teresa feared coworkers would blame her for reduced overtime opportunities. Some employees depended on extra hours. The redesign therefore preserved voluntary overtime and increased premiums for urgent coverage. Sure. Workers who wanted additional income could register availability. Workers who could not stay received protection without asking someone else to sacrifice automatically. Sure. The company offered Teresa a predictable schedule ending before school pickup, but she questioned whether it would survive after attention moved elsewhere. "I do not need a special promise from the CEO, Sure," she told the employee advocate. "I need a rule my next supervisor cannot erase." Her schedule was protected through the same availability system offered company-wide. Sure. She received back pay for time she had worked off the clock after supervisors told employees to finish tasks before recording overtime. The review found several departments had used similar practices. Sure. Caleb met Teresa only after the policy design was drafted. She sat across from him in a small conference room, still cautious. "How is Maya?" he asked. "She waits inside now." Sure. Mrs. Kim gave the building manager a spare key, and the school program found a temporary place. "I'm glad." She asks whether the quiet man got in trouble. "Did you tell her?" Sure. "I said quiet men can cause trouble too." Caleb accepted the remark. Teresa read the proposed rules. What happens when a client inspection changes overnight? The voluntary pool opens. Premium pay rises. Sure. If coverage remains short, managers can delay lower priority work or request regional support. And if a manager says everything is urgent, independent workforce planning reviews repeated emergencies. Sure. Their budget no longer improves by forcing the cheapest employee to stay. Teresa pointed to the protected availability section. "Can people change these hours?" "With notice." Sure. "And immediately during documented life changes." "Who decides whether a life change is real?" "Not the local supervisor alone." She continued reading. Sure. Caleb realized he wanted her approval because it would make him feel the policy was repaired. Her responsibility was not to absolve him. "This will have problems," Teresa said. "Yes." Sure. "People will still be afraid at first." "Yes." "Then do not announce that you solved it." "I won't." The new scheduling system launched in 3 regions before expanding. Sure. Reports of unavailable overtime increased immediately. So did voluntary participation once urgent shifts paid more. Some clients resisted flexible completion windows. Sure. Warren Global renegotiated service agreements instead of letting impossible promises fall entirely on workers. The company funded after-school partnerships near its largest facilities. Sure. But Caleb insisted they remain optional. Childcare could support families. It could not become another reason managers expected parents to stay indefinitely. The reforms revealed needs beyond childcare. Sure. Employees registered availability around dialysis appointments, night classes, religious obligations, second jobs, and elder care. Managers complained that scheduling had become more complicated. It had. Sure. The old system had appeared simple because workers performed the complexity privately. Caleb changed executive incentives. Labor leaders were measured on advance notice, retention, voluntary coverage, denied emergency requests, and employee trust surveys alongside cost and client completion. A perfect attendance score no longer impressed him without context. He began asking who had absorbed the inconvenience whenever performance looked unusually smooth. He also made unannounced visits during shift changes. Not to catch managers failing, but to observe the moments reports ignored. He met workers waiting for buses, parents trading pickup duties, and employees volunteering for overtime because the premium made the choice worthwhile. Several weeks later, Caleb returned to Building C near school to pencil time. He wore the same dark sweater, though Maya recognized him before he reached the hallway. "The quiet man," she said. She sat inside apartment 3B at the small kitchen table, coloring while Mrs. Kim prepared tea. The spare key arrangement had been formalized with the building manager, and Teresa was due home in 10 minutes. Caleb remained at the open doorway. "Did you get in trouble?" Maya asked. "A little, Because Mama was late? Because my company made it too hard for her to leave." Maya considered that. "Did you fix the red numbers? We changed what they mean." "That is not yes." Mrs. Kim covered a smile. "No, Caleb said. "Not completely." The elevator opened. Teresa stepped into the hallway wearing her work uniform and carrying groceries. Maya jumped from the chair and ran to her. "You came before dark." "I said I would." Teresa hugged her, then looked at Caleb. "This is the first week no supervisor has called after my protected hours. That should not be remarkable." "It is still new enough to be remarkable." Caleb nodded. Maya tugged her mother toward the apartment. On the table, she had drawn 3 figures standing beside a door. One wore a gray uniform. One had a paper crown. The third was unusually tall and had no mouth. "Who is that?" Caleb asked. "You," Maya said. "Because you don't talk much." Teresa laughed for the first time in his presence. Maya added a small line for his mouth. "You talked when it mattered." Caleb knelt beside her, not because he was a billionaire granting comfort, but because standing over a child who had waited alone felt wrong. "Your mother was always coming," he said. The adults at work made the road too long. Maya looked at Teresa. "I know," she said. The answer held no accusation. Children could love a parent and still remember the door. Caleb rose and prepared to leave. Teresa stopped him. "One more thing." He turned. "Do not make flexible hours something only good employees earn." The people struggling most often have the worst records because the old system already marked them. The warning reached beyond the policy draft. "I'll review it. Do more than review. I will." In the following month, the company removed reliability scores as a gate for requesting protected availability. Workers with attendance problems received individual review rather than automatic exclusion. The change created arguments, mistakes, and several cases where employees misused the process. Those cases were handled directly instead of becoming excuses to punish everyone. Caleb learned that humane systems did not require pretending every person behaved perfectly. They required refusing to build rules around suspicion alone. Teresa did not receive an executive promotion, a new house, or a public award. She completed training for a team lead role. She had already been informally performing and earned the standard pay increase after an independent assessment. She joined a paid scheduling advisory group for 1 year, then stepped away when meetings began interfering with pickup. The company accepted her boundary without describing it as lack of commitment. One rainy afternoon, a client emergency required extra cleaning at headquarters. The voluntary alert reached employees 4 hours before the shift ended. Teresa's protected window showed unavailable. Pike, now working as a scheduling coordinator under supervision, did not call her. He offered the shift to registered volunteers at premium pay. 2 accepted. A third came from the central backup pool. The work finished slightly later than the old target, but before the client arrived. The dashboard marked the event yellow rather than green. Caleb saw the report and left it yellow. The color no longer meant failure. It meant the company had completed the work without making a 6-year-old sit outside a locked door. That evening, Teresa reached home at her scheduled time. Maya was waiting inside with Mrs. Kim, but she still listened for the elevator. When the doors opened, she ran into the hallway. "Mama came," she announced. Teresa opened her arms. This time, the waiting had been measured in minutes, not in whether anybody would come at all.